I never imagined I would find myself in this situation. I am a 28-year-old woman who got divorced from my ex-husband Mike, 34M, last year. We had been married for 5 years before we decided to split up. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it wasn't terrible either. We simply grew apart over time, wanting different things in life. Mike was focused on climbing the corporate ladder, often working late and traveling for business, while I wanted a more balanced family life. After months of discussion, we both agreed that divorce was the best option for us. The divorce process was painful but amicable. We agreed to share custody of our 4-year-old daughter Emily, with me having primary custody and Mike getting her every other weekend and 2 weekday evenings. We both wanted to maintain a cordial relationship for Emily's sake, and for the most part, we succeeded. Mike was always punctual with child support payments and flexible with schedule changes when needed. My older sister Sarah, 32F, was my rock throughout the divorce. She had practically raised me after our parents died in a car crash when I was 18 and she was 22. Instead of pursuing her dreams of going to medical school, she took a local job to support us both. She never complained about the sacrifice, saying that taking care of me was her priority. Over the years, our bond grew stronger, and she became more than just a sister. She was my best friend, confidant, and the only real parent figure I had left. Sarah never married or had kids of her own, always saying she was focused on her career in pharmaceutical sales. During my marriage, she was a constant presence in our lives. She would babysit Emily whenever Mike and I needed a date night, take her to the park on weekends, and was always there for school events. Emily adored her Aunt Sarah, and I was grateful that my daughter had such a loving aunt in her life. Last month, I started noticing changes in Sarah's behavior. She began canceling our weekly sister dinners, which had been our tradition since I was in college. At first, her excuses seemed reasonable: late meetings, client dinners, or being too tired from work. But then she started missing our Sunday brunches too, which she had never done before, even when she was sick. I tried not to read too much into it, assuming she was just going through a busy period at work. But then Emily started saying things that didn't add up. She mentioned having dinner with Aunt Sarah at Daddy's house and going to the movies with them. When I asked Sarah about these outings, she would brush it off, saying she was just helping Mike with childcare when he was busy. The truth came out in the most unexpected way. Last Tuesday, I had an emergency at work. A major presentation got rescheduled and I needed to stay late to prepare. I called Mike and asked if I could drop Emily off a few hours earlier than our usual Wednesday evening handoff. He agreed, sounding slightly hesitant but not saying no. When I arrived at Mike's house, I used my old key, which we kept for emergencies involving Emily, to let myself in. The scene I walked into felt like a punch to the gut. Sarah and Mike were sitting at the dining table, candles lit, wine glasses half empty, and what looked like the remains of a romantic dinner for two. Emily was nowhere in sight. I later learned she was already asleep upstairs. They both froze when they saw me. Sarah jumped up from her chair, knocking over her wine glass in the process. She started rambling about how this wasn't what it looked like, but Mike cut her off. In a calm voice that made everything worse, he admitted that they had been dating for the past 6 months. He said they hadn't planned for it to happen, but they had fallen in love and were tired of hiding it. As I stood there, pieces started falling into place. The missed dinners, the mysterious outings with Emily, the way Sarah would change the subject whenever I mentioned Mike. My sister, who had held me while I cried over my failed marriage, who had helped me pack up my wedding photos, who had promised me I would find someone better than Mike, she had been secretly dating him all this time. Emily's strange comments over the past month suddenly made sense too. She had mentioned having special family dinners at Daddy's house but wouldn't tell me more because it was a secret. My own daughter had been coached to lie to me, caught between her aunt's deception and her loyalty to me. When I finally found my voice, I asked how long this had really been going on. Sarah swore it only started after the divorce was finalized, but something in her eyes made me doubt her. She kept saying they wanted to tell me but were waiting for the right time. Mike added that they didn't want to hurt me and thought keeping it quiet was better until they were sure about their relationship. I left that night feeling like my whole world had been turned upside down. Over the next few days, Sarah bombarded me with calls and texts, begging me to talk to her. She showed up at my workplace, trying to explain herself, saying she never meant for any of this to happen. But how do you accidentally date your sister's ex-husband for 6 months? How do you accidentally lie to your sister's face repeatedly? The situation got even worse when our extended family found out. Our Aunt Carol, who had stepped in as a mother figure after our parents died, called me and said I was being childish. She reminded me that I was the one who wanted the divorce, so I had no right to be upset about Mike moving on. Our cousin started sharing social media posts about toxic siblings and letting go of the past, clearly aimed at me. The final blow came when Mike requested a modification to our custody arrangement. He wanted Emily to spend more time at his house because Sarah was planning to move in with him. He argued that having Sarah there would provide Emily with a stable maternal figure during his custody time. The implication that my sister would be a better mother figure than me was like a knife to the heart. Now I find myself in an impossible situation. The sister who sacrificed everything to raise me is dating my ex-husband. My daughter is caught in the middle, probably confused about why mommy won't come to family dinners at daddy's house anymore. And my entire extended family thinks I'm being unreasonable for not embracing this new modern family arrangement. Sarah keeps sending me long messages about how much she misses me and how she never intended to hurt me. She talks about how we can still be a family, maybe even a closer one now. But how can I ever trust her again? How can I watch my sister play house with my ex-husband and my daughter? The worst part is that everyone seems to think I'm the problem for not being able to get over it and be happy for them. Update 1: The situation with Sarah and Mike has gotten worse in ways I never imagined possible. Last week was Emily's school performance. She was playing the lead role in her class play about helping the environment. Both Mike and I were supposed to attend as per our co-parenting agreement. I arrived at the school early to get a good seat, only to stop dead in my tracks when I entered the auditorium. There in the front row sat Mike and Sarah, and on her left hand was an engagement ring that caught the light every time she moved. They had gotten engaged without telling me. I later found out through my cousin's social media post that they had announced their engagement at a big family gathering 2 weeks ago, one that I wasn't even invited to. Aunt Carol had hosted a celebration dinner for them, and everyone from our extended family was there, even relatives we hadn't seen in years. The photos showed them all smiling, toasting to the happy couple, while I was completely in the dark. I somehow made it through the first half of Emily's performance, sitting alone several rows behind them, fighting back tears as I watched my sister lean her head on my ex-husband's shoulder. But the real pain came after Emily's part was finished. She ran straight to Sarah, jumping into her arms with excitement. Sarah pulled out a bouquet of flowers that she had apparently helped Emily pick out herself. My daughter barely looked in my direction, too busy showing Sarah all the details of her homemade costume. It wasn't until later that evening that I discovered the full extent of their involvement. Emily casually mentioned that Aunt Sarah had been coming to school during lunch breaks for the past 3 weeks to help her practice her lines. She had also spent weekends helping create Emily's costume, making it from recycled materials as part of the play's environmental theme. All of this happened during Mike's custody time, and no one had thought to inform me about any of it. After the performance, I confronted Mike in the parking lot while Sarah was helping Emily change out of her costume. He dropped another bombshell. They were planning to get married in 6 months and wanted Emily to be their flower girl. But what he said next made my blood run cold. Sarah was already looking into the legal process of adopting Emily to, as he put it, make their family complete. The thought of my sister legally trying to become my daughter's mother was too much to bear. I immediately called my lawyer the next morning to understand my rights. She assured me that Sarah couldn't adopt Emily without my consent as I was the biological mother with shared custody. However, she warned me about a concerning possibility. Courts often favor stable two-parent households in custody battles, and Sarah and Mike could potentially use their marriage to argue for primary custody. I spent the next few days in a daze, barely able to focus at work. Then Sarah reached out again, this time bringing Aunt Carol to act as a mediator. They showed up at my apartment unannounced one evening, and against my better judgment, I let them in. What followed was 2 hours of what they called clearing the air but felt more like an ambush. Sarah, with tears in her eyes, revealed something that shattered what little trust I had left. She admitted that she had been in love with Mike for years, even before our divorce. She claimed she never acted on her feelings while we were married, saying she had buried them deep down out of loyalty to me. But now I question everything, every time she babysat for us, every family dinner, every moment she spent with my husband while I was building what I thought was my life. Aunt Carol kept insisting that enough time had passed since the divorce and that I should be happy my daughter would have a stable home life. She talked about how Sarah had put her life on hold to raise me after our parents died, and how she deserved a chance at happiness too. When I pointed out the betrayal of trust, Carol dismissed it as childish thinking and said that in a few years, I would look back and realize I was overreacting. The conversation ended when Sarah started talking about their wedding plans. She had the audacity to ask me to be her maid of honor, saying it would help Emily see that we're all still family. I asked them both to leave and haven't spoken to either of them since. Later that night, my cousin Lisa called to tell me that Sarah had been sharing her side of the story with the entire family. She had painted herself as the selfless aunt who had sacrificed everything for her ungrateful sister, and who had finally found love only to have that sister try to ruin her happiness. According to Lisa, most of the family was sympathetic to Sarah's version of events, seeing her as the victim of my inability to move on. I feel like I'm living in some bizarre alternate reality where everyone thinks I'm the villain for not wanting my sister to marry my ex-husband and adopt my child. The sister who raised me, who I trusted more than anyone in the world, not only betrayed me but is now trying to take my place in my daughter's life. And somehow, I'm the one who's being unreasonable. Update 2 yesterday, something happened that changed everything I thought I knew about Mike and Sarah's relationship. Emily and I were going through old photos to make a scrapbook for her school project. As we flipped through the pictures on her tablet, she showed me photos I had never seen before, pictures from a beach trip that I knew nothing about. The photos showed Sarah, Mike, and Emily building sandcastles and having a picnic on what Emily said was a special family day from last summer. The timing hit me like a truck. Last summer, Mike and I were still finalizing our divorce. He had told me he was taking Emily to visit his parents that weekend, but apparently, that was a lie. These photos proved that Sarah and Mike had been lying about when their relationship started. They weren't together for just 6 months like they claimed, they had been sneaking around while Mike and I were still legally married. After Emily went to bed, I dug deeper. I found more evidence of their deception on my cousin's old social media posts. There were photos of Sarah at places Mike had visited for business trips during the last months of our marriage. In one photo, she was at a restaurant in Boston where Mike had a corporate meeting. In another, she was sightseeing in Chicago during the same week Mike had a business conference there. But the betrayal went even deeper. Through a mutual friend who works at Mike's law firm, I discovered that Sarah had been actively helping Mike build a case against me for primary custody. She had been keeping a detailed log of every time I was late for pickup, every time I had to change plans because of work, and every time I asked for schedule adjustments. She even documented times when Emily mentioned missing her dad during my custody time. What made me feel physically sick was finding out that Sarah had been attending meetings with Mike's lawyer, providing information about my parenting habits and work schedule. She used her position as my sister to gather ammunition against me. All those times she offered to help with Emily so I could work late or handle emergencies, she was documenting everything to use against me later. The most heartbreaking revelation came from Emily herself. During breakfast this morning, she innocently mentioned something that made my heart stop. She told me that Sarah and Mike had been telling her they would be her real family soon. They had been saying things like when we're all living together and Sarah becomes your new mommy. They had been preparing my daughter for a future where I would have limited access to her, all while pretending to support our current co-parenting arrangement. I confronted Mike about this over the phone, and his response was telling. Instead of denying it, he defended their actions, saying they were just trying to prepare Emily for their new family dynamic. He claimed they were doing what was best for Emily by providing her with a stable 2-parent household. When I brought up their lies about the timeline of their relationship, he brushed it off, saying the past didn't matter anymore. Sarah tried to reach out after my call with Mike, sending a long text message about how she could explain everything. She claimed the beach trip was innocent, that nothing happened between them until after the divorce was final. But how could I believe anything she said anymore? The sister who raised me, who I trusted with everything, had been systematically working to replace me in my daughter's life. The hardest part is seeing how their manipulation has affected Emily. She's become confused about her relationship with me, sometimes asking why I can't be more like Aunt Sarah. She started calling their house her other home and talking about how excited she is for Sarah to be her new mommy. They've been quietly reshaping my daughter's perception of our family, making me feel like an outsider in my own child's life. I've scheduled an emergency meeting with my lawyer for tomorrow. With evidence of their deception and their attempts to alienate Emily from me, we might have a strong case to modify the custody arrangement. The thought of going through another legal battle exhausts me, but I have to protect my relationship with my daughter. I won't let them erase me from Emily's life, no matter how hard they try to create their perfect little family. Update 3 After discovering the extent of Sarah and Mike's manipulation, I knew I had to take drastic steps to protect myself and Emily. I spent weeks planning our exit strategy. I applied for jobs in different cities and finally accepted an offer in a city 3 hours away from our hometown. The position came with better pay and more flexible hours, which would allow me to spend more time with Emily. I didn't tell anyone about my plans until everything was finalized. I found a nice apartment near a good school, signed the lease, and then filed for a custody modification. In court, I presented all the evidence of Mike and Sarah's attempts to alienate Emily from me, the documented timeline of their lies, the photos proving their relationship started during my marriage, and most importantly, proof of how they had been manipulating Emily by promising to make her a real family. The judge was particularly concerned about Sarah's role in all this. He said it was inappropriate for her to be positioning herself as a replacement mother figure while actively working to undermine my relationship with Emily. The fact that she had been documenting my parenting for Mike's custody case while pretending to help me as a supportive sister particularly troubled the court. The custody hearing lasted 2 days. Mike brought up my decision to move away, arguing it would disrupt Emily's life. But my lawyer effectively argued that staying in our current situation would be more damaging to Emily's emotional well-being. The judge agreed, especially after hearing about how they had been telling Emily that Sarah would be her new mommy. The judge granted my request to relocate with Emily. Mike still has visitation rights on alternate weekends, but with one major condition: Sarah is not allowed to be present during his parenting time. The judge was clear that her presence was detrimental to Emily's emotional well-being and my relationship with my daughter. Aunt Carol tried to intervene one last time before we moved. She showed up at my apartment with Sarah, both of them pleading with me to reconsider. Sarah cried about how she couldn't bear to be separated from Emily, who she claimed was like a daughter to her. I simply reminded her that she was never Emily's mother, and her actions had proven she couldn't be trusted to respect that boundary. We moved last week. Emily was upset at first, but she's already starting to adjust to our new life. Her new school has a great arts program, which she loves, and she's made a few friends in our apartment complex. I've enrolled her in therapy to help her process all the changes and the confusion from Sarah and Mike's manipulation. Mike calls Emily every evening as per the custody agreement. I can tell he's angry about the move, but he's maintaining a civil tone for Emily's sake. Sarah keeps trying to contact me through different family members, sending messages about how much she misses us both, but I've blocked everyone except Mike's number, which I keep only for Emily-related communication. Sometimes I catch myself missing the sister who raised me, the one who held me through our parents' funeral and taught me how to cook our mom's recipes. But that sister is gone. In her place is someone who betrayed me in the worst possible way, who tried to steal my place in my daughter's life. The pain of losing my sister still hits me sometimes, but I know I made the right choice for Emily and myself. We're starting fresh in our new city, just the two of us. It's not always easy, but for the first time in months, I can breathe freely without constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering what they're plotting next. Emily and I are building our own kind of family, and that's enough for us.